students. Hello, good morning. I hope all of you are well. This is the video lesson for the next lesson, which is entering the nutrition lab. We just did the counting calories, but now, it's gonna let me. It might not let me. Okay, well, you'll notice that if you navigate through this nutrition lab, you can do the counting calories lesson, but you can't do the next one, which is fueling. Well, you can do the next one, fueling your team. But for the points to load, you want to make sure you go over to Canvas and actually load the fueling your team through this link. That'll make sure that those points are automatically uploaded over to your grades. They're just two different versions. The one linked here is the newer version. So you want to make sure you do that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go into that. First, I want to share just a few resources that you can watch the intro to this lesson as well, so I'll keep this pretty short. But this is a really neat book, How Food Works. The facts visually explained, so I'm a visual learner. I like to see things written out in diagrams. You might know that from my notes that I like to take. And so this walks through a bunch of different components of food. Everything from salt. You guys might like salty food. I've been having really great conversations with students about how all of this ties into your own personal life, so that has been really cool. So one student really knew a lot about salt because of the condition that she has, and that allowed her to really access this information. So I highly suggest doing the My Body, My Experiment and joining for your lab, which is changing one variable of something in your life and measuring the effects of it. And that's been really fun to chat with a lot of you guys about what you're thinking about, whether or not you're changing the amount of carbohydrates you're getting in your diet, or how you're organizing your life with to-do lists. I also encourage you to just keep track of what you eat. So this, I've shown you this before, but this is going on my little spreadsheet here, and it's been really fun. I know that before I eat anything, I want to make sure that I'm going to record it so that we can talk about it in class on Friday, which is tomorrow. So let us go ahead and learn a little bit more about food by going camping. How many of you have been camping? How many of you will start off class kind of asking that, like, what do you pack? What's your favorite camping food? That's sometimes one of my favorite things to cook with friends and meal plan beforehand. So when I used to teach at a school where we would take kids out backpacking, we would get kids in groups and you would plan your meals every single day. And so you'd have 4 different people and you'd have to come together, and then we'd go to the grocery store and you would buy all your food, and you'd have to make sure that what kind of considerations do you want to think about as you're going camping? What kind of foods can you not buy to bring, and what are going to be the best options? Think if you're backpacking, you want it to be really light, and if it's hot, you don't want your food to spoil. Okay, so here we are. Imagine we're going camping. What of these following things do you bring? And let's say you could only bring 2. What would be the 2 that you would bring? Chips, your cell phone. How many of you guys would leave your cell phones at home? Maybe you have maps on your cell phone. Nowadays, it's hard to separate. A map, I would probably bring water and some food. I maybe even would camp out. If you guys ever camped out and not used a tent, that's sometimes pretty fun. So, while that seems a little silly, well, we're going to Mars to think about packing for a camping trip, astronauts typically they do the same process. They choose from pre-selected food, and they have an actual flight surgeon that monitors their dietary intake while they're on board. Why do you think this is a top priority? Is it that food increases morale, eating food is psychologically pleasing, food provides energy to complete tasks, or food contains nutrients to prevent bone and muscle loss? Probably the last 2 are the most important, but also, can you think about how happy you are when you eat good food? I know I love eating awesome food, so that definitely increases my morale, and it's psychologically pleasing, something to look forward to. Astronauts need to have enough energy for their trip. Giving this amount of energy goes beyond just eating the right number of calories. It also depends on the types of food consumed as well. So you couldn't just eat Twinkies, although maybe, I don't even know, do you guys like Twinkies? Like, what would be the one junk food that you feel like would be amazing to just eat that junk food, but then in reality you're like, whoa, I don't feel that great afterwards because I'm not getting the same amount of nutrients that I need. We're going to look in then today on what are the macromolecules in food, how does the body maintain stable energy levels, and how does the body react to a prolonged energy shortage, and how would that affect a Mars mission? So what is this? So we're going to look in, if you're keeping track of your food, you definitely are looking at food labels. What do you see on a food label? Calories, proteins, carbs, caffeine, calcium, fat, or water? I have never really seen caffeine or water on a food label, have you? No. So we're going to take a look at a couple different types of foods here, and we're going to look at the macronutrients. Those are the nutrients that your body needs in large quantities to function. So nearly all foods contain some combination of these. So here, if we look at an avocado, 58% fat, 34% carbs. Chicken breasts, 90% protein, 10% fat. Macromolecules in pizza, we got lots of carbs, but some protein and fat as well. Even more carbs come from mac and cheese. And then we got lots of carbs in a turkey sandwich with some protein as well. Okay, so the three big ones then are carbs, proteins, and fat. And I'm going to let you go through this. Take a look at this 100-gram serving of each of the following foods. So because it's 100 grams, we can then compare which has the most number of these things, even as it's represented as a percentage. So go ahead and scroll through. We have soda coming in at the highest amount of carbs. Fats, avocados here at 58% fat. Which contains the most proteins? You want to scroll through. Looks like steak does. Which of these foods is high in both fats and carbs? So which is the highest in fats and carbs? Because there's some that have, like pizza has fats and carbs. But an avocado here has more carbs to the fat ratio. And then the last one, which of these foods is high in both protein and fat? What do you think? Probably the steak. Awesome. Okay, and I want to take a brief aside to read you this page from this book that I was talking about. So have you ever thought about why red meat is red? So here you can see, I hope you can see this. Let's see. This little infographic shows that the redness actually comes from, basically this is muscle, and there are red blood cells in there, and our blood is red because of hemoglobin, and in meat it would be red because of an iron-containing myoglobin, which is similar to hemoglobin in red blood cells. So the myoglobin is in the muscles. Myo meaning muscles. It contains iron. So if you think of when something rusts too, it becomes red. Or if you go on the red planet in Mars, there's lots of iron there. And that iron actually makes the meat sometimes taste metallic if there's not that much fat. And then, I don't know, this was kind of interesting. This is a hanging pheasant, but they're mentioning that hanging foods, especially wild-caught meats, game birds, they have enzymes which start to break down and attack other cell components. Proteins are broken down into savory amino acids, glycogen into sweet glucose, and fats into aromatic fatty acids. So enzymes breaking down, you saw that when you did your experiment where you had amylase in your mouth breaking down carbohydrates. Okay, back to our lesson. Okay, so I'm going to start taking notes now because we're going to get a little bit more information about each three of these, carbs, fats, and proteins. So let's see. Carbohydrates, go ahead and take notes, maybe make 3 big boxes in your notes, one for carbs, one for fats, one for proteins. Carbs. In your first box, carbohydrates, carbs for short, they're molecules composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, CH and O. They're readily usable, readily used energy source for cells. They are found in fruits, vegetables, grains, dairy, and beans. Grains, beans. Okay, and then we have fats, the next one over. There are many types of fats, but they're all required for your body to function. Think of all your cell membranes are made up of fats. So they are a source of energy, immediate and stored. We can store energy in fat as well. So I'm going to say needed for body functions. And then I'm going to write in cell membrane. And also things like hormones need fats. And then some of these sources, nuts, oils, butters, avocado, olives, salmon, dairy, and red meat. Okay, and our last one here is protein. They are a large complex of molecules made from any 21 amino acids. You might remember that from our lessons a while back when we looked at the chemical nature of biology. We looked into chemistry. But here, these proteins are important for cell growth, repair, maintenance, immune function, nutrient storage, and transport. And you should have that down in your notes somewhere else too, but it never hurts to write it twice. Transport, for example, like we just talked about, hemoglobin, and then myoglobin also would store some of the oxygen. So if I asked for an example of those two, that would be something you can give me as an example of a protein in a DBA. Based on your own experiences and the types of food in each macronutrient is associated with, rank which of the 3 macronutrients you think contains the most energy. Okay, so go ahead and put those in whatever order you think. Carbs give us energy, fat gives us energy, proteins give us energy, but which one gives us the most energy? Okay, here we go. And, okay. Before we do this, there's a really cool lesson. This lesson is going to tell you the answer, but you could actually find it out yourself if you wanted. So I asked one of my track kids for one of his Cheez-Its, because I'm trying to be really good with my diet, right? But there are moments in which I've really, really loved Cheez-Its and Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Those are my 2 snack foods I think I could live off of. Anywho, so what you can do with this Cheez-It to figure out how much energy it's going to give you, and then like let's say a Cheez-It compared to a Dorito compared to a slice of butter. It's helpful for this next lab if you can burn it, because what you're going to do is burn this thing and see how much energy it produces. And I'll make a separate video about this because I haven't figured out all the logistics of how to do this at home. You would light this thing on fire, and then how much energy it produces you need to capture somewhere so that you have a measure of that energy. Because it's hard to really see like how much energy does this give us. Like if I eat it, how do I know how much energy is there? So I put a vessel of water on top, and if we were in a lab, we'd have a test tube, and it could be all very controlled. We could wear goggles. In your home, maybe you have like a glass cup. You'd want it to be glass so it doesn't melt. You don't want it to be plastic. And then you would see how much the water increases in temperature. That then is a proxy or a model, and it gives us an estimate for comparatively how much energy one of these would produce. Because what a calorie is the increase in the temperature of water, 1 gram of it, 1 degree Celsius. That's what a calorie is. So that's what our lesson's about to teach us. Here we are. The energy your body needs for you to be an amazing student, athlete, cook, or gamer comes from these 3 macronutrients. Although all can provide the body with energy, they are not all the same. So in 1 gram of protein, there are 4 calories. In 1 gram of fat, there are 9 calories. And in 1 gram of carbs, there are 4 calories. And again, someone figured that out by doing that burning lab. As someone who is, and go ahead and write this down in your notes as well. This will be helpful when we get together in our live lesson tomorrow. Okay, so let's select the food of your choice and calculate how many calories are in it. Okay, so I love avocados. Let's select the avocado. We look at this avocado. We're looking at, there's obviously no nutrition label for fruits and vegetables, which is where the internet comes in handy. Here they have included a nutrition facts sheet. Enter the total number of calories. So here we have calculate the number of calories. Okay, so we're going to have to do some math here. So if we have 22 grams of fat, we're going to have to multiply that by 9. That'll give us how many calories from fat that is. So 22 times 9, and then we have to add in how many calories come from carbohydrates. So we have 13 grams times 4 from the carbs, and then 3 grams of protein times 4. Go ahead and add that up and enter that in here. Ooh, and I encourage you to write here. This is what I did. You can take a look at my notes so far. I just added it up. And then I encourage you to try to do mental math as much as possible. Try not to refer back to your calculator. So 262, all right, so here we go. Let's learn a little bit more about how we digest carbohydrates. Although all of 3 macronutrients can potentially supply the body with energy, carbohydrates are the body's go-to source of energy. But why is that? Carbohydrates are molecules found in food that are actually longer chains of sugar. Carbohydrates make up a large portion of foods like grains, fruits, vegetables, beans. Okay, so an orange, fructose, fructose is a sugar commonly found in fruit. It breaks down into, sometimes converted into glucose. From what I understand, having taken this class on sugar recently, is that fructose actually gets turned into fat by the liver. So that's interesting. But okay, amylopectin, it's a chain of glucose molecules that makes up starch. Remember how the enzyme in our mouth was called amylase? Because it's breaking down this molecule called amylopectin. And it breaks it down into glucose. Here we have a glass of milk that is, the simple sugar is lactose, and it breaks it down. I don't know if this is really true. Huh. Alright, always down to do some sleuthing. So found this article on this website. NCBI is a really good database for lots of scientific articles. You can see here there's lots of people working on this. It's peer reviewed if it makes it into a journal, such as Cell Metabolism. It's the journal. So here it's just talking about how it's a little misunderstood how fructose is used. And here this diagram puts it pretty well. With low doses of fructose, it will get cleared by the small intestine for the most part. And then that eventually, those nutrients get absorbed by the liver. And some of it does get converted into glucose, and some of it gets stored as fat. And then here we've talked a lot about the microbiota. So your microbiome can help clear some of that fructose as well. They can help process it. That means that those bacteria are basically eating that sugar, just like we would eat it, and using it for their own nutrition, and then converting it at the end to waste products. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm in a little bit of a rabbit hole I'll pull out of to finish this lesson, but it's kind of cool. If you're interested in biochemistry, it's really neat, like, to find out where fructose carbons go. So they're sleuthing all over the place. They're looking for carbons. They're like, how do these things get digested? Where do they go? The methods are pretty fascinating. They're using mice, Sometimes they are knocking out certain genes and seeing what happens in metabolism. So some of you maybe followed that story of glycolysis, having to have a specific enzyme to convert glucose and break it down into a 3-carbon sugar. So that's what they're doing here in this article, to try to figure out like how is that fructose metabolized or used by the body. All right, well, anyway, back to the lesson at hand. Okay, and yeah, lactose here is it's a disaccharide, so it has both glucose and this other sugar called galactose in it. So when it breaks apart, it breaks down into a molecule of glucose. Okay, so what happens to carbohydrates after they are digested in the body? Are they turned into glucose? Are they turned into longer chains of sugar? Are they immediately turned into fat? Are they turned into protein? Are they converted to fructose? They are mostly turned into glucose, because that is what your body's going to use, right? When we look down at the mitochondria and each one of our cells, so glucose, glycolysis, and then the Krebs cycle, and then ultimately the electron transport. I think it's cool to remember how much we were counting up our ATP, right? We had the ATP investment and outcome, and then ultimately we're making, the whole point of all of this is to make ATP. Remember. Okay, so let's get out of the screen. Now we can look at where glucose from carbohydrates is going to be critical for humans on Earth or astronauts on their mission. So here you can see that glucose is used only as an energy source for the brain. Nope, we can see it's used for your muscles too. It's used to fuel muscles from the cells of the body, not only the heart, but every cell in the body. Okay, so don't choose that one. Okay, so what happens when you run low on glucose? What does your body do? The glucose derived from carbohydrates plays a critical role in providing the body with energy. By traveling through the bloodstream, glucose can be delivered to cells throughout the body. Without this energy, the body's organs would shut down. So whether on Earth or in space, your body does whatever it can to make sure levels of glucose in the blood stay at the same level. Do you remember what that's called when the body tries to keep the chemical balance? Keeps everything the same? Homeostasis? That's an important word to go ahead and write that down in your notes, homeostasis. So when things get out of whack, your body tries to regulate it. Here we have trouble thinking clearly. Okay, so here we can learn a little bit more. In extreme conditions, high blood sugar can cause life-threatening dehydration, excessive urination, thirst, and fatigue. High blood sugar is when levels go above 180. Low blood sugar is when levels drop below 70, so our range is between 70 and 180. Signs of low blood sugar include difficulty concentrating, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, and blurred vision. And in extreme conditions, low blood sugar can cause fainting, seizures, and damage to the nervous system. So trouble thinking clearly is probably going to be part of a nervous system, so I would say that's low blood sugar. A fasting blood glucose of 80 is normal, I'm going to say. Yep, between 70 and 180. Excessive urination is going to happen on this side when we have too much. Your body's going to try to clear that glucose by getting rid of it through the urine. And fatigue. Here we have fatigue and fainting, seizures. Fatigue is low blood sugar. Oh, and I missed that. Okay, over here we have fatigue on both sides. So go ahead and change this one to both high and low glucose levels. All right, and yes, we're going to go into more homeostasis. Your body does whatever it can to maintain a steady blood sugar level. When the body senses a low amount of glucose in the blood, it launches a response to fix the problem. This process of maintaining a stable state is called homeostasis. How exactly does that process happen? Imagine you've chowed down on pizza. As the carb-rich bread digests in your stomach, how do you think your body will respond? The body will try to increase the levels of glucose in the blood, which has decreased as a result of eating the pizza. Nope. The body will not respond because nothing will happen to the blood sugar levels after eating the pizza. That doesn't sound right either. The body will not respond because the sugar in pizza is easily dissolved into the blood, or the body will try to decrease the level of glucose in the blood, which will have increased after eating the pizza. Yeah, so you get a big jolt of some sugar to your system, and they're like, all right, now what do we do with it? And that's the whole point of homeostasis. So now what do we do? We're going to clue into the pancreas, which is this 6-inch little organ. It's going to jump into action. It is going to produce the hormone. Do you remember this from our lessons? From your lab, insulin. And that insulin is going to help take the glucose in the blood and take it into your cells. The pancreas also produces other enzymes like lipases that break down lipids, which are fats, amylases like we have in our mouth as well to break down amylopectin, proteases break down proteins, and then glucagon, insulin, these are hormones that signal things to happen. All right, so insulin's a hormone released by the pancreas, travels through the blood and helps the molecules of glucose enter the cells of the body. This reduces the level of glucose in the blood. This response by the pancreas is an example of homeostasis, a bodily response to maintain a set level of some parameter. In this case, the body releases insulin to keep the level of glucose in the blood stable. Select a description that best describes the step in the blood sugar regulation in the images below. So here we have glucose from the stomach going into the bloodstream. Food is converted into glucose and enters the bloodstream. And now we have insulin from the pancreas, senses the blood sugar and increases insulin. And now here's that cell membrane. There's those glucose molecules and the insulin molecules. And the insulin's actually going to open the door. It goes right there and it kind of knocks, turns a key, opens this membrane protein, and lets the glucose in. Once the glucose goes in, the cells absorb glucose, returning the levels back to normal. So these are 4 really cool steps to jot down in your notes. Okay, so just pause that for a minute to draw this little diagram. I'll post the notes, but something like that be really helpful for you to remember that process. All right. Negative feedback. Never good to get negative feedback, but it's really important in the body to maintain homeostasis. It is something that happens by opposing the actions of anything that disrupts the balance. So in this case, when the blood sugar levels are high, the body will respond by doing the opposite, lowering blood sugar levels. It does this by releasing the hormone insulin, which decreases blood glucose levels. Okay, so, we're getting a little bit more into detail that you might not need to know at this level, but let's go for it. Here we have a stimulus, a change that disrupts a regulated variable in the body. And then we have a effector, that is the pancreas. It's the target organs that are affected. Okay, so stimulus affects the effector, that's the pancreas. And then there is a response, so a receptor, a structure that detects the change and initiates this change. And then the final part here is the response, the change as the result of regulation. And so I mix these up a little bit. So we have stimulus. It senses the disruption in the change. The receptor then detects that change, that's the pancreas. And then the effector is the target organ, so that's actually your cells here. And then the response. Okay, so negative feedback is the body initiates a response to stop the change, and positive feedback is the opposite, when the body initiates a response for the changes occurring to it. So which of the following are examples of negative feedback? Okay, so when you get too hot, your body produces sweat to cool you down. Yep, that's a stimulus, and then a change to bring you back down to normal. Ethylene is a molecule that is released when a fruit ripens. When one apple in the bunch releases ethylene, all others will begin to do so as well, which ripens the whole batch. So that would be positive feedback. One thing increases something else. Here we go, what we just talked about. Blood sugar levels rise. Insulin lowers glucose levels. When you begin to bleed, blood clotting molecules signal other blood clotting molecules to action. That would be positive feedback. When you add more money into a bank account, the interest increases and you earn more money. Again, that's positive feedback. Jot a couple of those down. That would be something I could ask in a DBA. Okay, so extension, diabetes. So this is getting to what we've learned about. Okay, patients with diabetes are not able to produce enough insulin. How much does affect blood sugar regulation after a meal? Match the appropriate description to the diagram located at the right. So, oh, here we go. All right, so what do we need to do? Here's a diabetic patient eating a meal, and then the pancreas senses an increase in glucose. And then what's going to happen next? Excessive sugar is deposited in the liver, insufficient insulin is released. Yeah, so diabetes here, insufficient insulin is released. Blood sugar levels are going to remain high. And then, or I guess sugar is unable to, blood sugar levels remain high because sugar is unable to get into the cells. Positive versus negative feedback, 1. Okay. You just learned that a negative feedback loop, a change slows or stops the process. Think about how blood sugar levels relate to the amount of insulin secreted by the pancreas. As blood sugar levels increase, the amount of secreted insulin increases. As insulin levels increase, blood sugar levels decrease. Okay, we just learned about that. Identify the graphic to the right and accurately represents a negative feedback loop. Number of owls, number of mice decreases, number of owls decreases, which in turn decreases mice number. That, even though it's a negative response, it's a positive feedback loop. So here's negative feedback. One thing increases, the other decreases. Okay, which of these is a positive feedback loop? Okay, here we go. If we select this one, itchiness and mosquito bite, we see that while negative feedback loops are bouncing, positive feedback loops are spiraling. Okay, so what happens between ingestion and absorption? After ingesting or taking in food, it's broken down immediately with physical, chewing, and chemical saliva processes. Before most molecules are absorbed into the bloodstream, digestive enzymes and chemicals digest them. So we saw that with the amylase. You can chew food and then also have it be broken down by enzymes. And let's now learn a little bit more about each digestive enzyme and chemical. Match each enzyme or chemical to its organ. Oh, I don't know how in the world you know that, so let's do this together. Okay. Oh, we have to click on these circles. Mouth has salivary amylase. So the mouth, let's find our amylase. Cool. Let's go to this, the pancreas, or the stomach, hydrochloric acid and pepsin. Here we have the duodenum, pancreatic amylase, and pancreatic lipase, and trypsin. Lipase breaking down lipids, amylase breaking down amylose or sugars, and then trypsin. pepsin breaking down proteins. Okay, and then the final thing is our small intestine, which is actually quite large. We have lactase, maltase, sucrose, isomaltase, and pepsidase. Lactase, maltase, sucrose, isomaltase. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, let's look at each one of these molecules. Digestion with pepsin 1. Pepsin is a key enzyme in the stomach that breaks down peptide bonds between amino acids in a protein. Pepsin has a relationship with another molecule, pepsinogen. But what is the relationship? Here is, we're going to imagine we're performing an experiment by adding pepsin to a solution of pepsinogen to understand the relationship. Before you see the results, what do you predict would be the effect if the relationship was a negative feedback loop, a positive feedback loop, or no feedback loop at all? Okay, so if it's negative feedback, then the rate of pepsin development will decrease. So we would get a signal that says, okay, pepsin's up, let's bring it down. If it's positive, it would increase, and if there's no feedback, it would stay the same. The question here is, which model would you predict to be used for the digestive process? In times of food abundance, a positive feedback loop provides more digestive enzymes right where they're needed. Or in times of food abundance, the negative feedback loop shuts down digestion since it's not needed. Or in times of food abundance, there's no change. I would say maybe when there's food, we need more digestive enzymes. Okay, now we have two different experiments here, one with pepsin and one without pepsin. So here, pepsin formed over time. The blue line is pepsinogen with pepsin, and the other one is just pepsinogen. Okay, and at this rate, I just took a 10-minute break because this information was getting pretty in the weeds, and I suggest you do the same thing. So pause the video, go take a 10-minute break. But here we go. I just did that, so we're going to move back into this. Pepsin formation. So if we have more pepsin added, then the rate of pepsin development will increase. If more pepsin is added, then the rate of pepsin development will decrease. If more pepsin is added, then the rate of pepsin development will stay the same. Well, we see here there is an effect. Which one is it? One is increasing. And then because of that, are they interacting in a, so I would say that is a positive feedback loop. One increases the other. Okay, so here we have an inactive enzyme called pepsinogen converted into pepsin by high acidity and pepsin. In positive feedback loop, pepsin increases the rate of making more pepsin from pepsinogen. All right, so were our predictions supported? Yes. Yeah, and this is a neat thing to note. Remember that a supported or an unsupported prediction is successful if you learn from it. So even if we had that backwards, that's totally fine. All right, so positive feedback is the tool the body uses to maintain homeostasis. When positive feedback can move things away from equilibrium, over the long run it helps maintain homeostasis. In this case, increasing pepsin is needed when food must be digested. Why doesn't the positive feedback loop, e.g., production of pepsin, spin out of control? E.g., or for example, exempla gratia in Latin. Spin out of control. Drop each of the suggested reasons into the category. Okay, so it does spin out of control. Pepsin continues increasing its own development until we are 100% pepsin. That's probably not true. Pepsin does not continue its development, just that the excess passes through our system. Okay, maybe it gets urinated out. The positive feedback loop keeps spiraling up, but the molecules run out of building material. That could be true. Or the positive feedback loop keeps spiraling up, but once the food is digested, the stomach environment changes. Pepsin will not function the same and will slow down. That kind of seems right to me. Correct. The stomach's environment changes as pepsin and other enzymes digest the food. This happens before the molecules would run out. Also, while some excess molecules are urinated out like vitamin C, pepsin is not. It's good to know. Yeah, so some people say like when you get too much vitamin C, it doesn't really matter because you're gonna pee it out anyway. All right. Okay, so let's sort the whole process below. First and last, chief cells. All right, here we go. Chief cells in stomach secrete the inactive enzyme pepsinogen. When the body smells and tastes food, parietal cells secrete acid in anticipation for food. It seems like that would be before that. As digestion is completed in the stomach, active serotonin or secretion of acid decreases. Seems like that's at the end. Pepsin decreases functionality and degeneration of pepsin decreases. That probably happens after. Pepsin helps convert more pepsinogen to pepsin. Pepsin breaks down and digests proteins. That's going to happen up here. Some pepsinogen is converted by pepsin to by increased acidity. That's going to happen. Okay, I think this is good. So first we have the taste and smell of food. We're secreting acid in preparation. And then there's some secretion in an inactive enzyme of pepsinogen. It's then converted into pepsin by that increased acidity. These two might be mixed up, that's my guess. Pepsin helps convert more pepsinogen, so then that's positive feedback loops going and going. As the digestion is completed, active secretion of enzyme of the acid decreases, and then the pepsin decreases in functionality. Let's see. Okay, so that's what I thought. This has to be made first. Cool. We're going to think about this sequence the next time we eat bacon, because this pepsin is used to break down. Whoa, this is a lot of details, y'alls. But laryngopharyngeal reflux is caused by pepsin moving up the stomach to the lower throat. Unlike the more commonly known gastroesophageal reflux disease, which is associated with heartburn and the taste of acid, LPR can have such common symptoms such as throat clearing, sore throat, and indigestion. Anyone know anyone? Bring this to class if you know anyone that has this. I do not. So, but that's interesting. All right, cool. We're getting a really good review of positive versus negative feedback now. You have seen both negative and positive feedback loops. Now let's complete our own. So here if we have pepsin, that's increasing pepsinogen conversion. High glucose levels, that's going to increase insulin. Breastfeeding is going to increase milk production, that's a positive feedback loop. And the last of these, water retention. I don't really feel like any of those have an effect on water retention. Oh, okay, maybe high blood pressure. Okay, sweet. Yeah, let's try that out. Put that back. So if we have let's see, if we have low blood pressure, meaning like the volume of blood doesn't push against your vessels, then we're going to increase water retention. We want more water. When we have too much water, or if we have not enough water, that's going to have low blood pressure. Too much water would then decrease the water, lowering the blood pressure. Okay, and that's your task. Can you find positive and negative feedback loops in your day-to-day life? We'll ask about that in the live lesson on Friday. Consequences of food deprivation. Okay, how does your body react to low energy? How do you react to low energy? I know sometimes I get hangry, like the emotion of being hungry and angry at the same time. How about you? Also, sometimes my brain stops working very well because, of course, our brain needs that glucose to survive, to be making connections, to be learning and growing. In this process of homeostasis, in the case of blood sugar, maintaining a set level of glucose is critical to providing energy to all cells. Given the importance of food and the glucose that it provides, what would happen if your body were to be deprived of food? This can occur on a mission to Mars if the crew runs out of supplies or veers off course. When deprived of food, whether on Earth or in space, the body can launch a number of responses to generate more energy. Let's see what happens first by starting at phase 1. Okay, yeah, so this is pretty interesting. If you were to not have food, what would happen? Okay, and just another little side note. As we jump into thinking about what happens when you don't eat, interesting to think about intermittent fasting, which is something a lot of people do. And it says something about that in this book. It's pretty cool. Here it shows a diagram of, it's really hard for you guys to see that, huh? 5 to 2, meaning 2 days fasting, and then alternate day fasting, 2 main types of fasting. And a lot of people do just a more abbreviated version, which is not eating breakfast in the morning. Although some people who don't eat breakfast tend to have lower BMIs, but you might think that's the body mass index, so lower fat. But that might be for other reasons. Can you think of what other habits might start happening if you don't eat breakfast? Maybe in the mid-morning you start eating a snack and you eat a donut instead of having a real good meal in the morning. But yeah, there's some lists here, potential health benefits. Increased insulin sensitivity. So higher insulin sensitivity helps the body to process glucose and carbohydrates more efficiently, reducing the risk of obesity and diabetes. So I think that's kind of interesting, and we'll look at how our bodies respond when we don't have food here. And I'm curious, have you ever intermittent fasted? Not eat for a certain period of time. If you do, after about 6 to 8 hours from your last meal, the level of glucose in your bloodstream gets quite low. Sensing this, your pancreas quickly jumps into action. So, how do you predict it will respond? So yeah, there's this other player here called glucagon. That's what we're going to go into. Glucagon, it's a hormone that's released from the pancreas, travels through the blood, and releases stored glucose from the liver and muscles. This response is an example of homeostasis. In this case, the body releases glucagon to increase the level of glucose in the blood to a normal level. Okay, so here now we have okay, this is blood glucose levels rise, increasing glucose back to normal levels. That's right. Or maybe we want to say the lack of food decreases the glucose. And because of that, the pancreas senses the decrease in blood sugar and releases glucagon. The glucagon goes to the liver and muscle cells to release glucose. So we have some storages of glucose in the liver. And then at that rate, the blood glucose levels rise, increasing glucose back to normal levels. So that can only last for so long. What happens afterwards if we're out of sugar? What do you think is the next best thing to use if you've used up all your carbs? You think it's proteins or fats? My guess is fats. So there's extra fat in the body that can be converted into molecules that act like glucose. Burning 1 gram of fat produces 9 grams of calories. Burning 1 gram of carbs or proteins produces 4 calories of energy. So if you're needing energy here, your body's probably going to go to the fat. Having to use fat as the primary source of energy marks the beginning of the body's second phase in response to lack of glucose. Given that the body needs to generate energy to power all of its cells and organs, such as the brain, heart, and muscles, it starts getting resourceful. This phase usually kicks in at about 8 hours after your last meal. So let's look at fat cells. That's pretty cool to look at. Let's look at phase 2. Yeah, okay, so we're getting into this keto stuff, ketone bodies. When glucose becomes scarce, the body uses ketones for energy. Your body's fats, although rich in energy, are not glucose. This is a problem for organs such as your brain, which rely on glucose as their primary source of energy. To get usable energy out of fats, the body converts fats into ketone bodies. These ketone bodies act like glucose and are used to power your organs. In time, even your brain and muscles adapt to using ketones produced from fats. So that's what a ketone body looks like. How many days does the body significantly increase its conversion of fatty acids, fat into ketone bodies to use as an energy source? So let's look at some data. On our x-axis is days of starvation. Let's just say fasting. That's pretty intense. When does it look like that happens? Maybe after day 2, we have more ketone bodies in the blood. And that's as the glucose level is decreasing as well. Okay, and what will happen as our fat reserves dwindle down? After your body runs out of fats to be used for energy, it begins to get desperate. At this point, your body will enter the third phase in response to lack of glucose. Despite running out of resources, the body will do whatever it can to help you survive. So where can your body get the energy it needs? Okay, so probably the next source is proteins. So it will pull from your muscles, which are mostly made up of amino acids. This will waste your muscles and make it harder to find food. Okay, the only circumstances where a human would come to the point where they run out of fat to produce ketone bodies is the event of starvation. If the member of your crew to Mars were to run out of food aboard their spaceship for the long term, this is an emergency situation. This could enter the third phase of energy loss. So this is extreme. This isn't just skipping a meal anymore. During starvation, your body begins to target itself to produce energy. In this phase, your body can convert amino acids, or the building blocks of protein, into glucose. This is not an efficient process. To obtain these amino acids, the body has to break down muscles, which are rich in the molecule. How might using amino acids for energy affect your body? Using the amino acids in your muscles for this reason wastes or break down your muscles. That sounds like the best option. In studies of starvation in the early 20th century, people began to lose muscle mass. This is the body's last resort. It essentially breaks down your own tissues. I'm kind of curious in the studies of starvation. Wonder what that's all about, or if that was ethical. Oh wow. And brief aside. So after World War II, 36 men voluntarily starved themselves. Oh wow, this happened at my alma mater, University of Minnesota football stadium. Oh wow, I did not know about this. Okay, so instead of going into the military, you could be part of the civilian public service, and they're oftentimes referred to as human guinea pigs because they would help in medical experiments. Let's see. And the methods, so they ate a normal diet, 3,200 calories, followed by a period of 6 months starvation, where they worked really hard too, 15 hours per week, walked 22 miles per week. Walk 22 miles per week. That's a challenge for you. Do you think you can do that? A lot of you have Fitbits. You use that to track. And then educational activities. So they were thinking a lot too. And then they found out that the results were dramatic. So their appearance, right? They lost their strength and stamina, body temperature, heart rate, and sex drive. Hunger made the men obsessed with food. They would dream and fantasize about food, read and talk about food, and savor the 2 meals a day that they were given. Decreased in mental ability, although mental testing of the men did not support this belief. Oh, interesting. So 3 were excluded. They didn't want to do it anymore. Okay, then they even ran studies as they came out of the starvation period. Some of them were left to their own devices, and they, as can maybe be predicted, engaged in extreme overeating. Yeah, and so that's pretty interesting way to have gotten those test subjects. All right, so let's go ahead and figure out what's happening here. So phase 1, we start by just accessing the glucose in the liver using glucagon. Phase 2, we start using fat to do something called gluconeogenesis, make new glucose. And then final phase, we start breaking down amino acids. Oh, and phase 2 also we produce ketone bodies. So that's like what a lot of people try to get in with ketosis. And we'll see. I bought some keto strips, so we'll see if that happens with this diet. Doing my own ethical experiments on my body. All right, so let's summarize. Why are carbohydrates like glucose so important for the body? The body uses carbohydrates as its main source of glucose. Carbohydrates consist of glucose, which fuels the body. When glucose runs low, the pancreas releases glucagon, a hormone that releases stored glucose in the blood. After storage of glucose are depleted, usually after about 8 hours, the body can use fats as an energy source. After being deprived of glucose for more than a week, your body will begin to break down the amino acids in your muscles. This severely weakens your body and prevents your crew from successfully completing tasks on Mars. So go ahead and take a look back at your notes. What are the macromolecules in food? So you should have written down, you have fats, carbs, and proteins. How does the body maintain stable levels of glucose? You should have a bit about homeostasis, negative feedback loops in terms of releasing hormones such as insulin. And then the final bit that you should have in here is what if we run out of food, going through phase 1, glucagon, releasing glucose, phase 2, fat is being burned to produce ketone bodies, and phase 3, proteins broken down. So this is my last little bits of notes for that. All right. And that was a pretty long lesson. Yeah, of course. Be sure to take some time to review this material and ask an instructor. And yeah, the importance of energy, finding out here. Based on what you've seen, why might making sure astronauts receive enough carbohydrates be successful? Based on what you've learned about carbohydrates as the importance of glucose, what actions do you need to take to make sure your crew doesn't suffer from energy storage en route to Mars? So go ahead and write your own answer there. Like, how are you going to plan their diets? And here, wrapping up in an hour, it is about time to go eat a nice healthy lunch, something with a lot of colorful vegetables and maybe a little bit of carbohydrates and some proteins. But again, you guys are cueing into what I'm trying to do, so I'm actually gonna not eat any carbohydrates. That's the thing. Yeah, awesome job. Keeping track of your food so we can go over it. Today I'm trying to fast on peanut butter because I really like peanut butter, but I eat a lot of it. So I think it's a healthy practice to be able to say, for today, I'm not going to consume that item that I really like. And you think of what kind of psychological benefits that might have for you if you push through something hard, tell yourself you're going to do something and don't, and then do it and follow through in that way. There is kind of something in here in the Yoga of Eating, which we can talk about as well, but basically says that diets aren't necessarily always going to work if you're just using willpower. And why do you think that might be? You can't just will yourself into these diets, because your body's actually sending you messages about things that you need in order to fuel things like your brain. So that's another book that I've been reading. Brain Food, What Can You Eat to Fuel Your Brain? All right, well, this has been an adventure in learning. It's a long lesson, but I hope you guys learned a lot, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Enjoy your food.